I've been testing the Sony A6700 for the last 2 weeks now, and the more I think about it, the more confusing this camera gets for me. Like, on one hand you have an industry-leading processor and an industry-leading sensor, both of which are used either in the ZEV1 or the Alpha 7R Mark V or the FX30. Depending on how you're going to approach this camera, if you are looking at it through a professional photographer, this camera is a mess. It doesn't have two SD card slots, it has a crop sensor, it doesn't have the joystick, and it's not very ergonomic. The viewfinder is placed in an awkward place. There's just so much you can tell about this camera. In these 2 weeks I spent with this camera, I realized that there's really more to it than just the pro aspect. This is a beginner camera with travel-friendly proportions that you can really use in case you want to travel, in case you want something a little bit more powerful than the Sony ZE1 and just have the ability to change lenses, which is a nice perk to have, not gonna lie. I will split this video in 4 parts: photography, videography, price, and whether you should buy it or not. So you might want to stick around to the end to find that out. Is it worth it to upgrade from the A6600 to the A6700? Which is a valid option, and this also depends whether you're a photographer or a videographer. If you're a photographer, I'm not so sure if you should upgrade to the A6700. And even if in tech these 4 years since the camera's releases is a lot, you won't really feel the difference. I'm sorry photographers if I upset you with this one, but hear me out. In terms of megapixels, you only get 2 megapixel more on the A6700. You indeed get the new BSI CMOS sensor, but I don't feel like it's that much of a difference. I didn't test the A6600, but from what I can find online, it's not that big of a deal between the two sensors. One thing you do get, which is kinda nice, is the Bions XR processor that powers this camera. And it's a nice quality of life improvement, but I don't feel like you really need that AI, since the A6600 does a pretty okay job in tracking the subject's face, and you won't really need that much of a power, especially with the price gap that you need to pay. If we are going to compare this camera to my A7 IV, well, that's a huge difference in both quality and resolution. As you can see in this photo, the left one was taken with my A7S and the right one was taken with the A6700. And if you look at it from afar, you won't really see the difference. You won't see that much noise in the shadows, and the colors look pretty great. The photo only starts to fall apart when you try to zoom in. I guess here is that 5 megapixel difference between the cameras. I'm not so sure if it's the resolution or just the quality of the sensor. I feel like even if you are taking a close-up on someone's face, like in this example, when you try to zoom in, the photo kinda breaks apart. You won't see the details in the skin texture, the autofocus seems like it barely missed, and I did have some mixed feelings about the photo capabilities on this camera. Again, I'm comparing it to my Sony A7 IV, which is a much higher priced camera with more high-spec functions and features and a larger sensor and its full frame and whatnot. However, all the photos that I showed you are shot with my lenses, the quality lenses which I use on my A7 IV, and that is kind of a bummer in terms of photography. So right now I'm going to find a spot. Hopefully I can take some nice photos and videos with this camera. It's pretty windy. I really hope that this camera does a pretty good job at removing the noise, since I did leave the wind reduction on. And hopefully you can escape it for all these cars. I do need to address some features that might bother some people. I know you'll hold this camera for a long periods of time, especially if you are traveling or just doing some photo shoots. I already complained in the unboxing that the ergonomics are not that good. You do get used to it after a while, but you do miss some features on the body. You do get the customizable buttons that you get on the A7 IV, and you also have that quick switch dial that you can also use to switch from photo to video to S&Q mode, which is also nice. However, you do miss the joystick on this camera. Indeed, Sony did build in some features, like you can press the middle button and just switch from selecting the settings or the position of your focus, or you can head into the settings and you're trying to pick to the viewfinder, you can use the touchscreen as a joystick, which I feel like it's an incredible feature to have in any camera, especially this one, since it does have the awkward position viewfinder. You do get a lot of real estate where you can place your finger and just control the focus. You don't really need to use that feature, only if you want to, because this camera is pretty great at tracking faces, at tracking animals, insects, birds. I was shocked that this camera managed to beat my A7 IV in terms of focusing power. Like, I was shooting photos in the dark at a party and for video as well, but we'll talk more on that later. Just shocked on how good it was. The focusing is great and the Bayans XR does an excellent job at it. In case you want to use this camera for sports photography, you do get 11 FPS burst, which is pretty great for this type of camera. However, I'm not going to compare it to the A1 or A9, which can do 30 FPS per second photos, if that is somehow possible. But you do have the feature, and if you do want to shoot some sports or cars or moving subjects, you do get that option, and it's pretty nice to have it. It's really important to talk about the video capabilities on this camera, because these are the ones that you should be looking at. If you're a videographer, this camera is a godsend in case you don't want to spend a lot of money on the FX30 or on the FX3 or even a full-frame A7S III. This is the best bang for the buck you can get. Now, why am I so confident in saying the video on this camera is great? Firstly, this camera does have some of the features that the FX30 and the FX3 use, especially with the flexible ISO shooting. Even though this has only one base ISO, the base ISO 800, it's pretty great even in low light. It won't blow anyone out of the water, but it does the job pretty great. In terms of performance, this thing can go up to 4K 120 FPS, which is insane since this doesn't cost as much as my A7 IV. You can also shoot in S-Log3, you can also shoot in S-Cinetone, which is another great feature that this camera has and mine apparently doesn't. You basically won't shoot in Rec 709 or sRGB or whatnot, you will shoot in S-Cinetone, which is already color graded with Sony's profile. And speaking of profiles, you can load up your own LUTs, like you can get up to 11 LUTs. You can shoot directly in your preset. You can download it and import it to the camera and just shoot directly into your LUT if you don't want to edit them in post later. This is an audio sample from the A6700, which I think is pretty great, but other than that, all the settings were left untouched. The microphone is put on auto, the wind reduction is also on, which I hope it will sound great. I'm speaking with a moderate voice and I'm just going to test how it sounds in the end. Testing the endurance of this camera was not an easy test to do, since this has the upgraded battery that the A7 IV uses. This is the NP-FZ100, which gives this camera a heck lot of power since it does have a crop sensor. It doesn't consume that much power, and you can shoot in 4K 60 up to 2 hours and in 4K 30 roughly around 2 hours 40 or maybe 3 hours depending on the conditions. Why am I saying that? Because this camera does not include an internal fan and I didn't have any overheating issues because this body is built out of magnesium alloy and it does have a pretty good thermal management. And as mentioned before, this is a beast at video because it does have that AI face tracking. It was just great. I did shot a few videos with it and I didn't have a problem. Heck, at one point I even forgot to switch the focus mode and the focus priority from animal to human, and it still did the amazing job at tracking the subject in the video. And even if you didn't saw the unboxing and the first impressions video, which you should by the way, did a short video with shots taken from this camera. It's a pretty good and nice camera for video. This camera is $1,400 and that might not sound like much if you are one of my American viewers or European viewers. However, in my country that translates to roughly 8,000 or 9,000 bucks. Yeah, it's an insane price for the camera. especially that at that price point you can literally get the A7 III. Okay, I get the fact that the A7 III does not have that new face tracking features and the focusing lags and some video features as well. I feel like having two SD card slots, a full frame sensor, more megapixel than you need to, it just doesn't cut it for me really. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're living in America or in the other part of Europe and you can afford this camera, sure, go for it. If you're a beginner photographer or videographer or just want to take this camera as a better and upgraded version of the ZEV1 just to take it for you to vlog and go travel with it, you can't go wrong with it. And what's nice about this camera is the fact that you do get full frame and flagship features. The Bionic XR processor, the customizable buttons, the S-Log3 and S-Cinetone modes for video, you get 4K 60 and 120. You do get the hot shoe, which you can pair with the flash and do flash photography. Like, it's a great all-rounder camera, but I feel like for the price you can easily justify it. Depending on how you look at it, if you are switching from a Nikon or a Canon or heck, even an old Sony camera, this might be the camera for you. If you're going to accept the fact that you are not going to be a professional photographer running with one SD card slot and a crop sensor. It's a great all-rounder package. Maybe the deal would have been sweeter had it had two SD card slots and maybe just ramp up the price like another $100 to justify for it. It's such a hard camera to put an emphasis to. You can either say that it's the king of the APS-C cameras because there's nothing else like it. This camera is a powerhouse. But on the other hand, if you want to shoot professionally and you don't want to invest that much money into a camera, well, you're kinda out of luck, especially for photography. I think at this point I defeated all my social anxieties since I pretty much have to talk in public in English, so it's pretty nice, I guess. Should you buy or shouldn't you buy this camera, or just wait it out till the next A6800 camera, or wait for the A7 IV to be on a deal and just get that? Depending on who you are and how much you want to spend on this, you can either think of this as the best camera ever or just another iteration of the 6600. If you're a photographer, I do not recommend you buy this camera since it does lack some features in the quality of the image. If you're a videographer and you just want to start out filming, this is great. You can't really find a better camera than this one, and if you pair it with just a simple lens, you don't really need that 24 f1.4. You can just pair this with a 50mm and it still does a great job, and you will get enough quality to shoot some short films and short videos and whatnot. If you are thinking between the ZEV1 and this one, you should definitely go for this one. I don't know, it was very fun to shoot with it, it was very fun to test it. As I said in my unboxing video, this is the first time I ever gotten a camera, and this is just my honest opinion on the A6700. It's a great camera, it has great performance. However, I will stick to my A7 IV any time of the day. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope I helped you in choosing your next camera, even if it's this one or not. Please make sure to check out PhotoSetup's website. They have a Pro Black Friday offer right now and you can get a lot of good cameras at a really low price. And I do want to thank them again for sending this camera out with the lenses to test. It was such a blast filming these videos. I never thought I'm going to have the opportunity to do this. So that's all I had to say for today. Don't forget to like the video and join the rebellion. Bye!